And just like that, we are back. Welcome to the Stupid Fans Club podcast. I am your host, Shaan Donn, and welcome to the club. Boy, oh boy, was it a big weekend for football. Um, College had a core shaking Saturday, and then week one of the NFL. In college, we had some near upsets, we had some upsets, and then we got a big fight coming up this weekend, Canelo versus Berlanga. So we're going to dive into all of that, starting with good old college football. This Saturday, the game to circle this weekend was Texas versus Michigan. And a really hyped up game. I think, especially after week one, I had some questions about Michigan and how good they really were. And everybody expected Texas to be pretty good this season. They're in the top five. So it was an exciting matchup, and kind of was the first big test for these two teams to see where they really stood. And Texas answered the bell. I think they immediately it didn't take long for them to show that they were just on a different level than Michigan. Um, I felt like that first drive, uh, that last college football playoff run for Texas, I feel like did a lot for Quinn. I think that did a lot for him, because you saw his poise right out the gate in this game. They went down on that first drive and were just converting third downs casually, and they didn't actually score on the first drive. They got to, I believe, a field goal attempt, and that was missed. And Michigan's crowd was just on fire. They were obviously hyped up for that game, looking for the big upset, and hoping to, you know, capitalize on that energy and aura from last year. But that just wasn't the case this game. I think Michigan's offense, I think their defense did as much as they could, but there was just no passing game. Their offense is pretty much um, Donovan Edwards in that running game. And Texas took advantage of that. They showed that they are a high powered team. They are an extremely dangerous team on both sides of the ball, really. They got whatever they wanted. Again, Quinn Ewers looked fantastic. And I think it was even amazing to see how Michigan's defense was getting pressure. Like they were pressuring Texas and Quinn back there. But Quinn just kept stepping up and making the big plays. And that was just really, really amazing to see. Again, Texas is just a dangerous team. My dogs, we face them later on in the season, and that's going to be a heck of a matchup, mano y mano. I believe they moved up to number two in the rankings this week after that performance. And I have no argument against that. They looked that good. Now, again, not much resistance from Michigan. So, how good are they? We will find out later on, of course. But they really look like a dangerous team, a team that you're going to have to go out there and beat, and compete against. So I turned it off after it got out of control. 24-6, I was kind of zoning out, and then I tried to hang in there to see, and then Texas scored again, making it 31-6. Blowout game. And that shot Michigan down from 10 to 17. Again, I feel like Michigan's shot to kind of show where they were, because you had some people bullish on Michigan and you had some people low on them, and this was everyone's first real look at them to see how they would stand up against them. And even a loss to them, but a competitive loss would have been impressive for me for Michigan. But again, they have issues at quarterback. They have issues on the offensive side of the ball. And they are, I don't think, contenders this year, and just not ready to compete with a team like Texas this year. So that was the first primetime game. That was the big noon game this Saturday, I believe. And again, Texas dominated. And then later on that night, the other one circled, and I feel like they're circled every week just because of the attention they bring. That Nebraska Colorado game, Lincoln looked like it was on fire out there. All of that sea of red, that primetime game. I mean, it looked, you don't see many primetime Nebraska games. They haven't been good for a very long time, but again, a lot of expectation around that team this year. Dylan Raiola at quarterback. And, they overwhelmed Colorado. It was, kind of evident that Colorado, similar to Michigan, just wasn't on their level. I think Nebraska, and they are now in the top 25, but going into the game, they were an unranked team. It's always interesting with these Colorado games because there's just hype around an unranked team like you've never seen before. Like, to my knowledge, like usually when there's this much, this many eyes or hype and primetime games around a school, it's usually a high ranked school, a competitive team. And so it's always funny. It was seeing that was an unranked matchup primetime game. But that's what happens when Deion Sanders is your coach. And so for this game, I wanted to do the good, bad, and the ugly for Colorado. This wasn't competitive, really. Nebraska made a statement early, and pretty much the whole first half they kind of put it away. But let's start with the good for Colorado. The good for me was that their defense didn't allow any touchdowns from Nebraska in that second half. Any points at all, actually. They didn't allow Nebraska to score in that second half. I had questions about their defense against North Dakota State. I didn't really know with how much success North Dakota State was having moving the ball on them. This, I feel like, was a sign of encouragement. I think, again, you look at the score, blowout win, wasn't close at all. But I think you look at it, Shador in the Colorado offense, they went 3 and out on the first drive, and then 4 and out. They went forward on fourth down on their second drive, and then Shador throws a pick six and drive after that. And so, 28 to what was the final score in that game, actually? 28 to 10. I think they ended up scoring in the end, actually. Yeah, 28 to 10. One of those touchdowns was a defensive touchdown that was handed to them. And so a shutout against Nebraska in the second half isn't bad. I felt like that's something for them to hang their hat on and build upon, and hopefully rely on later in the season. Again, they don't have a cakewalk schedule, so they're going to need that defense to show up. So again, good, bad, and ugly. I thought that was good. Shutting out Nebraska in the second half, some encouragement for them. Then we get to the bad. They have no running game. they have no presence of a rush at all, and I think that's why you get that pick six from Shador. They were already backed up. He was taking the snap from inside the end zone on that one, And by that time, Nebraska, this is their third possession, or Colorado's third possession. Nebraska knew that they couldn't run the ball, and so they're just gonna flat out play aggressively and bring pressure, which they did. And Shador knows that they can't run the ball, and he's just, that forces you to make a quick decision. Just try to get the ball out of your hands. Don't get a safety. And the other thing you don't want to do is throw an interception when you're already in the end zone, because that's what happens. Pick six. And so that is really bad for Colorado. And their offensive line, they were completely overmatched. And they had no answer for Nebraska. And again, I think that just is unfortunate. Shador was sacked 6 times this game, and kind of just reminiscent of what we saw last year. So that was the bad for Colorado. And the ugly truth, the ugly reality for Colorado here is, unfortunately, I think they are in danger of a repeat of last season. After seeing that game, this was really the test game for me to see where Colorado was. That first week, they had a competitive game against an FCS school, and won by, I think, 5 points or so. And saw some glimpses. We saw how great Travis Hunter is. We saw how great Shador Sanders is. No surprise. We already knew that. There were still questions about the offensive line. There were still questions about their run game, and still questions about the defense. Again, the defense, I think they answered. They tried their best. But when your offense gives you no production and you're just constantly on the field, it's only so much you can do against a quarterback, and on the road, just so many things going against you. So I think we got answers on all the things we had questions for coming into the season and after week 1. I say this also thinking about Nebraska, right? We expected Nebraska to be better this season, and to be a team on our radar, kind of where they are now. Top 25, y'all are making improvements. They are not, and it's early to say this, but in my opinion, they are not what Colorado made them look like. Like, Colorado played them like they were going into the Nick Saban Alabama dynasty that they had to go and defeat. And a lot of that, again, is just that environment, that hype around that team out there in Lincoln this year. But at the time of that game, that was an unranked team against an unranked team. And Colorado didn't even look like they were in the stratosphere of Nebraska, an unranked team at the time. And so when you put that into perspective, again, your schedule doesn't get any easier throughout this season. That was one of your tougher games, and it was a road game. But I mean, they play Colorado State next week. That's going to be a tough, there's no, similar to what I said last week about Florida State, there's no gimme those games. There's no Colorado will take care of that. You don't know. you won't really know. And so I saw a quote from Deion. He still has confidence in the offensive line. I'm not sure that I do. I don't know if Shador would echo that. But one game, maybe they'll bounce back from it. It's all Shiloh Sanders is out for a few weeks as well with that broken forearm. Hoping for a speedy recovery for him. But that was just disappointing showing for Colorado for sure. I'm sure they wanted to compete more, but all in all, it looked like kind of more of the same of what we saw last year. Um, but big game against Colorado State in Colorado State this time. Last year was in Colorado. It's weird, same exact state, just probably down the street or something. But yeah, that should be a good game. Good opportunity for them to try to bounce back against a not so highly ranked team. Maybe not as good as Nebraska, but still going to be competitive as we saw last year. So uh, that was the Nebraska Colorado game, and then ultimately this was a week of upsets and near upsets. It was one after the other. I really couldn't believe it. All of these competitive games. Um, we'll start with the near upsets. Penn State and Bowling Green. That was a really crazy game. And what was surprising to me was, sometimes you see these upsets against these big Power Five schools in a little school, and it is they have this system. It's kind of like fighting an awkward boxer. It's like you're I'm more skillful than you, but you're so awkward that I can't quite figure it out. Like a team that maybe runs the option really well, or something that just kind of throws you off, or is kind of just not what you see on a week by week basis. It wasn't that at all with Bowling Green. It's like I personally don't even know where Bowling Green is. I don't know where that is. I haven't heard of them. They weren't on my radar as one of those lower schools that could possibly give Penn State a threat. I don't think this was on anybody's radar. And their passing game was lethal. Like, it wasn't this unique offense that they were running in that game. They were throwing the ball and scoring on Penn State. What was it? Yeah, second quarter, they were up 17-7. And it was just like, whoa, what's going on here? Again, it wasn't on anybody's radar. And again, I think sometimes you see these schools get off to a quick start. Maybe they score against you first, and you're like, all right, our guys will show up. They're awake now. Like, let's play for real now, guys. And then when it got to 17-7, that's when you start feeling the uneasiness in the crowd and with the players. They're pressing a little more. It's like, oh no, that wasn't a fluke score. Like, if you guys keep doing that, we're going to keep doing this. It was kind of that wake up call. So that was very, very interesting to see for me. But that second half, I think it was an interception from Bowling Green, and then a late 41-yard touchdown drive by Nicholas Singleton to kind of seal the deal. I want to say Bowling Green hit a field goal late to kind of make it a touchdown lead, but Penn State escapes Bowling Green, and this is what I'll say about that. It's a difference between being a hunter versus being hunted. So these big schools, I feel like, especially we're talking about college kids here, they may come into these games with the expectation that they can just show up and win, not realizing that the team that you're playing, this isn't high school. They're not scared to play you. Like, they want to, a lot of them want to put themselves on the map for a potential roster spot in the NFL. And they want to make a statement for their school. They want to embarrass you. They want to spoil like, they're coming out with that underdog mentality. And if you don't match their energy and intensity, it can get out of hand. Like, you have to have that focus. That's why these coaches press on their players so much, probably even more for the games that you don't really get up for, because the team that you're facing this is their championship, right? So I think this is kind of the result of that. So that was Penn State and Bowling Green. Then we had Oklahoma State versus Arkansas. Another near upset. Arkansas is unranked. Oklahoma State was what, 13, 16, something like that. Mid-tier um, team. So kind of didn't feel all that much like a crazy upset on the horizon there, but that was a heck of a game. I think Oklahoma State went down big early. What Jaquindon Jackson was dominating the first half, and Oklahoma State ended up trying to get some momentum going into the half and ended up throwing an interception. Nothing went right for Oklahoma State in that first half. Like that kind of puts it into perspective. 21-7 at the half. And then the momentum began to shift with a missed field goal from Arkansas in the second half, and then a muffed punt. That kind of got Oklahoma State back into the game, and then they ended up tying it at 21. And then, and I want to do this, I will call it great play, poor decisions from the quarterbacks, the leaders of the offenses on these teams. Great play, poor decision. Okay. We have a tie game, 28-28. Oklahoma State quarterback, Alan Bowman, he makes an amazing 36-yard pass that put them at the 6 with a minute and 45 seconds left. They're about to punch it in, super high momentum. Alan Bowman looks at the Arkansas sideline, and as he's going down, he goes like this. Just like that, biting the lip and all. I don't know if he's biting his lip. But he decides to do that gesture, and the refs see it, and he gets penalized. They get penalized 15 yards for an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. And they go from the 6 to the 21. Again, and while I'm watching it, the commentator is like, he's a graduate. He's been there for 13 gazillion years. He's the veteran. He's the quarterback. He's the leader. And you do something like that. Again, great play, poor decision making. But it ends up not hurting them, but hurting them because they were at the 6. They could have they would have had an easier time punching it in from there, and they end up settling for a field goal. But wait, there's more. Great play, poor decision making. Taylon Green, the Arkansas quarterback, makes a 33-yard pass on third down. Time running out here. And it gets it to Arkansas's 27-yard line. Again, they just need to get in field goal range here. And I believe it was 11 seconds left here, right? The receiver gets tackled in bounds. And Taylon Green, I guess, unaware, or maybe he thought the receiver went out of bounds. I don't know what it was. He doesn't spike the ball and runs another play. The clock is running. It's running, and I believe he throws a pass to receiver, and I want to say he drops it or something, which stops the clock with 2 seconds left. And everybody, the commentators, me, everybody watching, I'm sure was like, what are you doing? You should have spiked the ball to stop the clock. And they barely have any time left with time on the clock to tie this game. It was 2 seconds on the clock. And again, ends up not hurting them. Arkansas's field goal kicker ends up making the field goal to tie it and to send it into OT. Directly after that, they needed another clutch field goal in OT, and he missed it. And then, luckily for him, Oklahoma State's kicker missed there, so it went into double OT. But then Oklahoma State ended up scoring a touchdown and stopped Arkansas to win the game. Big win for them. And we'll see how they look throughout the rest of the season. But that was a really good, exciting thriller game there. And then oh my gosh, Oregon versus Boise State. That was shocking because it was the one that everyone was pointing to. It was like, all right, when too many people are on a wave, you're like, all right, like it's probably burnt out now. Like there's no way this is going to actually happen. Oregon didn't look impressive in week 1 against Idaho State, something like that. They won, but it was kind of like it wasn't in the fashion that you expected Oregon to win in. And then you have Ashton Gentry, obvious Heisman candidate and a beast of a running back, rushed for 6 touchdowns and almost 300 yards in week 1. And so everybody's like, oh, well, if Oregon looked like this and Boise State looked like this and has this running back, they're going to lose. Like everyone was picking that to be the upset. But, you're just thinking Oregon is awake now. They, came out lackluster, thought they could just show up and win. They're going to show up against Boise State and look good. That's not what happened at all. It was, again, a near upset. It was a back and forth first half. Oregon was able to hold off Boise State right before the half from scoring a touchdown. But it was 20-14 at the half. And then back-to-back fumbles ended up leading to 2 touchdowns by Boise State. Like Oregon was just all over the place and looking poised to be upset that game. And once again, 34-27, Boise State is up. Great play, poor decision making. Oregon immediately responded after Boise State goes up a touchdown. They respond with a 100-yard kick return by Whittington. But what we have seen over and over and over and over again, as he's crossing the goal line, he drops the ball. And I just cannot believe players are still, I just cannot believe players are still doing this. That was so critical. Again, looking poised to be upset this game. Like, you're having the turnovers, and then you have this big momentum response here by Oregon. After Boise State just goes up, you answer right back, a 100-yard kick return. He took off. And luckily, there wasn't enough evidence. And again, it wasn't a clear, like, oh, it was a touchdown before. It was like, you couldn't really tell. Like, there wasn't enough to overturn it to where they could say, oh, no, he dropped the ball, this is a touchback, or whatever it is. And so they tie the game. Luckily, that doesn't bite them, and it's about 4.5 minutes left. And that's how it ended up ending. Oregon was able to stop Boise State and then kick the game-winning field goal. But back-to-back, unimpressive, underwhelming, whatever you want to call it, weeks for Oregon. They are in trouble. They have some, Evan Stewart. They have Dylan Gabriel. They have some weapons out there, and it is just not coming together this year so far. they've got to get things together. They've fallen each week. They were ranked. They started the season at 3, then they fell to 7. Now they're at 9. So a bad trend there from Oregon, and we haven't even gotten to the competitive part of their schedule yet. Like, these were supposed to be the Oregon shows their big and bad games, like, and they're not. So a team to keep an eye on there, and we'll see where they end up, but potentially not as good as we thought coming in here. Yeah, Ashton Gentry also obviously stand out in that game. Rushed for 192 yards after the week he had last week. 3 touchdowns. Looked completely impressive. Didn't matter if it was a bigger team he was facing this week. Went out there and dominated again. And then Gabriel sacked 4 times that game. So yeah, Oregon has some things to work out, and we'll see where they end up. And then some more near upsets, quick hits here. Kansas State escapes against Tulane. That was a heck of a game. It ended in a very controversial ending with a debatable offensive pass interference call that took away the potential game tying touchdown. But after that, Kansas State managed to rise 2 spots after escaping with that win. And again, there was a lot of movement this week with all these upsets and near upsets. So they were able to rise 2 spots, and maybe it's a salute to Tulane and how much they're respected and how tough it is to play. They played them in Tulane, so that was a tough game, a rowdy environment, but another near upset. And then one of the more intriguing ones, kind of went under the radar because of how it ended, but USF, South Florida playing Alabama. That was a competitive game. The score doesn't show it. It was a lot closer than what it looks. Alabama ended up winning 42-16, but that's simply because they scored 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. This was a 1-point game in the third quarter, 14-13, I believe. Yeah, so Alabama ended up pouring it on, but maybe another game where they fell asleep at the wheel. Last week everybody was high on them. This week it looked a little funny, but I'm not too concerned about them. I think they will show up in big games. They look pretty good in week 1, and eventually and turned it on and looked like Alabama at the very end. But that was an interesting one. So those were a mouthful of near upsets. And then we get to the upsets. Syracuse versus Georgia Tech. That was the first one. Out the gate, Syracuse went up big and really controlled the game. They went up 21-7 early, and the game was pretty much over. It was 31-14 with 8 minutes left in the fourth. Yeah, it like you weren't even really thinking much about it at that point. But Georgia Tech made it very, very interesting at the end. They went down the field on a 75-yard drive. Took about 3.5 minutes, scored a touchdown, and then they kicked the onside kick and got it. And then they scored again. So 31-28 game. This was looking pretty shaky for Syracuse in the end, but Georgia Tech just wasn't able to stop Syracuse, and they were able to walk away. But that was an interesting one. But Syracuse stepped up, got the upset. Kyle McCord, he played a perfect game, and I was really happy for him. He's a guy who a lot of people put a lot of the blame on for Ohio State, and Ohio State wasn't like they weren't a good team last year, but with the whole top 25 fighting for 4 spots, it's very little room for error. And then obviously their Michigan loss again last year. So he came out a big game for them, and he was 32 for 46, threw for 381 yards and 4 touchdowns. He looked fantastic. So I think that's a big confidence booster for him. And keep an eye on Syracuse. They look pretty darn good that game, and got a good coach. They look really energized under him. So we'll see what they where they land, and then that loss for Georgia Tech. They were only at, I want to say, 23 at that game, ranked 23, and they ended up falling out of the top 25. So first upset of that week, one of the earlier games, and then the most shocking of them all, Northern Illinois versus Notre Dame. I can't even say NIU. NIU upsets Notre Dame, and again, this was one where wasn't much to it. They beat Notre Dame. Notre Dame had no answer. They had ample opportunities to, they won, what was it, 16-13? They had ample opportunities to respond. They had ample opportunities to answer, and they just couldn't do it. They kept getting stopped. And shout out to Northern Illinois, who saw that coming. I think it's just a really bad loss for Notre Dame, especially after week one. It's kind of like bringing your fan base all the way up here. You go in on the road, although you're the favorite. Everybody knows it's very tough to play at Texas A&M, and primetime game. I mean, and you go in and get that big win, and then you come out and get upset by a team who was on no one's radar. That's gut wrenching, and just got to be super disappointing for Notre Dame. So. Just a really bad loss for them, and they took the biggest hit. They fell 13 slots. They went from 5 to 18. They I guess kind of got exposed, if you want to say. Just a bad showing for them. But the good thing is, early in the season, I'm sure they have some games where they can try to make that up. And climb back up these polls, but very bad showing for them, and the biggest upset of the week this week. And then on the smaller scale of things, in-state rivalry, Iowa State defeats Iowa. I think Iowa looks like they went up late in that third quarter, 19-7. But it was a failed 2-point conversion and an 85-yard touchdown pass response immediately after that to cut the lead down pretty quickly. And then Iowa State was just able to seal the deal with the field goal late. So another shocker. Big win for Iowa State. And finally, Illinois was able to knock Kansas out of the top 25 by defeating them. A week of upsets, and crazy to think that it could have been more. What a week for college football. And my dogs, go Dogs. We took care of business, Tennessee Tech. But still want, again, as you see, near upsets and upsets galore this week. So glad that they showed up. Didn't make it interesting. That was good to see. And now we go into Kentucky this weekend and play our first SEC conference game here, and we'll see how we do. Kentucky didn't look good against South Carolina. I think they got blown out at home. So I'm expecting the Dogs to look good, but got to show up for that one. Kentucky this week, bye week next week, and then we go to Alabama. So It'll be interesting. Can't overlook that game. Can't be looking too forward to the bye week. Got to show up. So we'll see how that goes. But that was week 2. It's kind of confusing with that week 0 thing, man. The how we count these weeks, but that was week 2 of college football. And then we had week 1 of the NFL. Very, very exciting week 1. And especially these primetime games they had to start the season. Ravens Chiefs rematch of the AFC Championship in Arrowhead, defending champions. What a game that it came down to the wire and was super entertaining. So it started out the gate seeing that Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry combination and how dangerous that looked. That first drive, I think they moved the ball down the field, and after they got into a certain area, you could see them just, Derrick, Lamar, it's your time to shine. And they did that. Derrick Henry scored the first touchdown of the season for them. And surprisingly, it that was pretty much as he did. He had 13 carries for 46 yards. As impressive as they looked on that first drive, either the Chiefs got caught on to it, and they did. They were able to neutralize him for the rest of the game. But I did hear Harbaugh after the game kind of mention that the 20 plus carries a game approach for Derrick Henry is not what they're looking for here. So maybe it looks like they'll be pretty strategic in how they use him and implement him. But it's pretty shocking to see that fade, especially after that first drive. But not when the Chiefs defense was looking like that. They were getting pressure on pressure on pressure. The Ravens offensive line didn't look great at all. It was a Chris Jones wrecking show out there. They looked the Chiefs defense looked really good, but obviously we come to see Patrick Mahomes in that electric offense. And I mentioned this last episode. The Chiefs had a down year offensively and won the Super Bowl. And thankfully, they had a great defense. And but this year they look as lethal as we are. Excuse me. As lethal as we are used to seeing. And Rashee Rice was one of them. He's clearly their number one receiver. It was a big shocker seeing Kadarius Toney get cut from the Chiefs before the season started. But then after you saw that performance last week, it was kind of clear that he's just not needed. Rashee Rice dominated, got whatever he wanted, and played a big game. I think, what did he have? I know he had 7 catches, 103 yards, 9 targets. He had a big showing and is stepping into those number one receiver shoes. Xavier Worthy scored the first touchdown for the Chiefs. And speed kills. They somehow always seem to find this speedster in Kansas City. And he was electric. I think he only even had 2 receptions, 47 yards, but scored a touchdown. And he had electric plays. Like, he's going to be a big time factor in their offense. Obviously a deep threat, but man, is he fast. And showed it in week 1. And then it just became the Chiefs defense making big stops, and the Ravens just got stagnant. It was Chris Jones. It was, Chiefs defense just looking stellar as they did last year. Um, but here come the Ravens late. They start making a push. They were able to get the Chiefs off the field just after the 2 minute warning, and they didn't have any timeouts. And so it's in Lamar's hands, and he drives them all the way down the field. And this was pretty shocking because again, the Ravens were just getting stopped for a lot of their drives in that second half, and again, the Ravens defense was keeping them in there, but you could feel the Chiefs starting to pull away. But Lamar marches them right down the field, and he had some missed throws throughout the game, but the biggest one was probably to Zay Flowers, who was wide open in the end zone, um, to potentially tie this game up. Threw it behind him, just missed him. Um, and you could see during the game that Lamar was playing with an edge. You could see it in his face, his energy. He was playing with an edge, and so a lot of these missed throws I kind of write off to, most of these quarterbacks aren't even playing in the preseason at all. So some of it is early season rust. Um, but some of it may have just been like he may have just been putting too much on himself, because we know, like, I don't even think Lamar still needs to prove that he can throw the football. He's not just this super accurate a passing quarterback, but he can throw the football. And he's a really good pocket passer. But at the end of the day, we know where his strengths are, and he showed it. He showed it. He was dangerous with his feet all night, but just has some crucial missed passes. And again, when they needed it most, he ended up missing Zay Flowers, but responded right back. Time expiring, Isaiah Likely finds him in the back of the end zone, and ultimately, as we know now, pulls what I call a KD, a Kevin Durant. Toe on the line. They were a toe away from tying this game up at the very end. It was a great play. I think Lamar still believes his toe was in, but I think it was pretty evident that he was just out. Um, that was unbelievable. Like you really thought that they, in their last breath, were able to tie it up, and actually go for two. When before it was announced that Likely didn't get in or stay in, you saw Harbaugh putting up the two. They were going to go for two, which I 1000% emphatically agree with. I think in Arrowhead, going against Patrick Mahomes, like, you're pretty much forfeiting the game if you don't go for two there. You have to expect Patrick Mahomes is going to go down the field should he get the ball first, and you just don't escape out of there with the win. Like, go for two. You have Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson get in the end zone. But it was never to be. Didn't end up getting in, but again, a heck of a way to start off the football season. I think both of these teams are going to be really good this year, really dangerous, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see them in late January playing against each other again. So that was Ravens Chiefs, and then the very next day on a Friday in Sao Paulo, Brazil, it was the Packers and Eagles. That was a sloppy game. I'll just go ahead and say it. It was very sloppy to me. There were 17 flags total, just flags flying all over the field. And players were flying all over the field too because they couldn't keep their balance. The field conditions just weren't good at all. And, you know, sometimes, a few times in that game, actually, I was looking at it like, ugh, probably would have preferred to see this in Philly or in Green Bay. Like, and again, Green Bay doesn't have the greatest field either, but um, I it just began to feel a bit sloppy. But just looking at it, I guess from a aesthetic perspective, but the quarterbacks themselves were a bit underwhelming. To be honest, I think Jalen Hurts has some good moments and he has some bad moments. And I think um, Jordan Love had some good moments and he had some bad moments. It was just kind of, again, that first week football, kind of could see the rust, and it was a bit up and down for both of them. But it was a great start for both of the defenses. 6-0 first quarter. The Packers had two turnovers, and held the Eagles to no points. But fly Eagles fly. They ended up waking up, and they start finding their rhythm towards the end of that first quarter, beginning of the second. And Hurts hit Barkley for an 18-yard touchdown pass, for Barkley's first touchdown as an Eagle. Who expected that? I did not know, and I'll say this: Barkley shocked me. We didn't get to see him a lot, especially in competitive games because he was on the Giants. But this was, I thought about it as I'm watching the game. It's like, this is my first real look. This is probably since OBJ was back on the Giants, earlier in Barkley's career. He looked incredible. I didn't realize how much of a receiving threat he was, but he played fantastic, and I was very shocked to see him get his first touchdown as a receiver. Jaden Reed for the Packers was electric. He was a clear standout. I had no idea who he was before Friday night, and now I will probably never forget him. He had 4 receptions for 138 yards and a touchdown, and had another one called back actually, so it could have had more. But and that was actually, no, I want to say he had 2 touchdowns. Yeah, 2 touchdowns. He scored receiving and he scored rushing, so he could have had 3 touchdowns. I put here Jaden Reed plus open field equals touchdown. It just seemed like every time he touched the ball, he was lethal. He was extremely fast. I say was as if he's not. He is extremely fast and extremely hard to bring down. He had a field day, and he is going to be an explosive player for them this year. A serious weapon. Had no idea he was there last year, but he really showed out against the Eagles. Very, very dangerous weapon. Those number 11s, man. Those, it seems like you can't wear that 11 if you're not a quick speedster or something. But he showed out. And then again on Saquon, his burst, his cutting ability, just rushing and receiving, like he was player of the game. Like he played out of his mind. I think 3 touchdowns in his debut. He looked fantastic. I was happy to see that for him, and seeing him get to be competitive or play competitive football again, after being with the Giants for so long. But starting that second half, it was a 2-play touchdown drive right out of the half. Big play to AJ Brown, and then Green Bay's running game started to come alive late in that game. It kind of went back and forth there, but Jalen Hurts made some questionable throws. He threw 2 picks, or had 2 turnovers, and had a few more that were almost thrown as picks. Just didn't look like himself, um, all the way, I would say. But um, ultimately ended up getting the win. And then, of course, Jordan Love, unfortunately, looked like he hurt his foot or ankle when I was watching it, but it turned out to be an MCL injury that'll sideline him for some time, but thankfully won't miss the entire season. Um, and Philly ended up sacking Malik Willis in the end to seal the deal for the win. But overall, there were some standouts for the Packers, Jaden Reed, and then Saquon on the Eagles side, obviously. Um, some questions for both sides. Um, Obviously, the bigger one will be for the Packers. Like, can they stay afloat until Jordan Love can return? And then what Jalen Hurts are we going to get this year? Are we going to get the late season Jalen Hurts from last year, or the Super Bowl contending Jalen Hurts from a year or so ago? So we'll see. My Falcons have the Eagles next week, which is a great segue into how terrible the Falcons offense looked in their debut this year. Played the Steelers, played them in Atlanta, but you probably couldn't tell from watching the game. There were terrible towels everywhere, but we'll get into that. The new regime for the Falcons, this was their debut. They cleaned house, got rid of coaching staff, brought in Raheem Morris, made a big splash in free agency with signing Kirk Cousins to a 4-year, $180 million deal. And we were having some reason to be excited. Most of the Falcon seasons have been, I don't know, coming into the season, we're like, I don't know what to expect, man. I don't know what we're doing. And, we knew we had players, and we just knew we needed to get the quarterback. It seemed that we handled that double the need. We got not one, but two quarterbacks that seemed legitimate. So a lot of hype coming into this game and this season. After the offseason. And all of that amounted to the Falcons scoring 10 points. We did that last year with Desmond Ridder. All right, so it was, to say it was a disappointment would be an understatement. On top of that, guess who the offensive coordinator is for the Steelers now? The Falcons' old head coach, Arthur Smith. And guess who was starting the game for the Steelers? The quarterback that the Falcons didn't choose and got, Kirk Cousins. And it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing on the offensive side of things. TJ Watt, there was just no answer for him. He dominated the offensive line all game. It felt like every snap. He made some plays that, thankfully, there were penalties that saved us, or else he would have made even more. He dominated our offensive line, and mind you, it wasn't like the Falcons' offensive line was an area of concern. There was actually an area of confidence for us this year, coming into the season. And so for him to just destroy the offensive line like that was extremely disappointing. And Falcons got to go back to the drawing board. A lot of hype, a lot of expectations now that we have a quarterback, and to have a 10-point outing and lose to a team that didn't score a touchdown. Like, let's put that into perspective. The Steelers have a heck of a defense too, and they have, I think, the best edge rusher in the game with TJ Watt. But like the Pittsburgh offense didn't do much. And so maybe it was a bad first game. First game jitters, maybe chemistry, trying to get that together. Um, Oftentimes teams aren't as good or as bad as they look in week one. Um, and new team, and you have to go against a guy who had what 19 sacks last year. Like for the first game, I think maybe it was an anomaly. Maybe we are a lot better than that, but all I know was that was extremely disappointing. Now, outside of the actual on the field play, um, let's talk about the Pittsburgh fans in Atlanta. Um, I have to give, as a native Atlantean, or Atlantan, whatever you say, um, I have to give perspective here, right? Not making excuses, but just some perspective. Okay. Atlanta is what you call a transit city, meaning we get a lot of influx of people, mostly from the Northeast, but all over, who come and nestle in Atlanta. It's a lot cheaper than most places in the country. We get all four seasons. We have really good wings. Like there's a myriad of reasons of why people move to Atlanta, but um, ultimately there's an ongoing joke of nobody who lives in Atlanta is from Atlanta. So when you put that into perspective, you realize that we deal with this. Probably the only sport we don't deal with it much is baseball. But when it comes to football and basketball, we see this all the time. When the Knicks come into town against the Hawks, it is a Knicks show in there. When LA comes into town with LeBron, it's a Lakers show in there. Like it's because a lot of these, and again, the Pittsburgh fan base travels well. They, all these Super Bowl, they have this historic just pride in their fan base and all of this. So they do travel well. But it's also when you get a team with that much history and that type of fan base in a transit city, it looks like what you saw on Sunday, which is where you couldn't tell if you were in Pittsburgh. It was to the point where TJ Watt was doing like, when do you ever see, besides trolling, when do you ever see the road team player hyping the crowd up? So that's not fun to see, especially when he's just killing your team. Um, but just some perspective there, right? We love our Falcons here. We show up for the games, but we are not only competing with out of towners, we're competing with the out of towners who already live here. Um, so that was that, and the second half, it was really just a thing of the Steelers were winning first downs. They kept getting on first downs. They were getting 5 and 6 yards, setting them up for 2nd and 2s, 3rd and 1s, and it's almost impossible to stop. Najee Harris in the background or in the backfield. Justin Fields, as a mobile quarterback, they were kind of just getting anything they wanted. But speaking of kind of that good, bad, and ugly, the good for the Falcons was their defense. Their defense showed up. Again, didn't let up a touchdown. Made the big stops when we needed to. It just couldn't get any help from the offense, man. Kirk Cousins played poorly. There's no other way around it. And I am a Kirk Cousins fan. Wasn't all that excited about him coming to Atlanta. I didn't know what to really expect expect from him. Didn't have a lot of expectations for him overall, but I knew he was better. Anything was better than what we had last year. I wholeheartedly believe that we had the worst quarterback in the league last year. Like it just couldn't get any worse than that. So I knew he would be an improvement from that. But after week one, I don't know. Like, let's, again, we'll see. Like, let's see what happens when we actually give him some protection. If we can give him some protection, hopefully the offensive line steps up from here on. But very disappointing first game for the Falcons. Let down, and then again to lose to the coach that you just let go at home. The Steeler takeover, the TJ Watt takeover. It was disheartening to see. And as far as the schedule for the Falcons, it doesn't get easier. It actually gets harder. We go into Philly on Monday Night Football next week to play them. And again, that's just going to be a tough game. That receiving core, goodness gracious, we have Saquon Barkley. Like, that's going to be a tough one. And then you're like, okay, can't get any worse than that. Yes, it can. We then go and play the Chiefs. Play them at home, but we see how much of advantage that is. And then we get into some division play after that. But Falcons are very realistically looking at an 0-3 start. Like, we play teams that are expected to contend this year, and they're going to have to strap up or shut up. Like, it's as simple as that. So that was the Falcons recap there. And then we'll get into what I would say were the underwhelming rookie debuts in week one. Caleb Williams, I thought I was like maybe seeing a typo when I first looked at it. Went 14 for 29 and threw for 93 yards. Didn't have a great game at all. The Bears offense didn't do much of anything at all. That was a pure win from the Bears defense. They had the block kick return for a touchdown, and pick six, maybe a couple pick sixes. But yeah, it wasn't a great outing for Caleb Williams. And their offense just didn't look fluid. But it is not uncommon to see, and they walked away with the win. And if you can have a defense like that to hold you over with a rookie quarterback, until you guys find that rhythm, that's a beautiful thing to have, and that's an advantage. So underwhelming debut for Caleb Williams, but he is the only rookie, or high ranked or high anticipated rookie to get the W. So good for him, and we'll see how he does the rest of the season. Then we had Marvin Harrison, who had an underwhelming debut. Was targeted 3 times and had 1 catch for 4 yards. Just kind of unimpressive. I did see a clip of Kyler Murray potentially missing him wide open down the field for the game-winning touchdown, but other than that, he couldn't really get off, and he fell short. But that was actually, a competitive game there. That one came down to the wire. Was actually impressed by the Bills. They are another team that everyone's kind of just expecting them to fade in the background. Josh Allen showed he's still Josh Allen. They got Keon Coleman out there. So we'll see how they do. But that was disappointing outing there for Marvin Harrison. And then wrapping it up, we had Jaden Daniels, who didn't play terribly. Um, had a lot of rushes, 2 touchdowns rushing, pretty pedestrian um in the passing game, but showed his athleticism there, running the football. But ultimately, Tampa Bay just too good of a oiled machine there. A lot of chemistry there. Baker Mayfield, vet, threw for 4 touchdowns. Commanders defense had no answer for him. So they ended up falling short. So then we have Bo Nix, who also was starting for the Broncos, and didn't do much better. 2 picks, no touchdowns. Rough debut. Rough start for the rookies, but I guess that's part of being a rookie. It's pretty tough. So we'll see how they do throughout the season. We'll keep an eye on them. And then the other big story here was Deshaun Watson. I was shocked at his performance. Didn't play well, but shocked at the calls after week 1 to have him benched. And I think when you look at it from afar, you're like, how could you say about Deshaun Watson? Like, benched, it's only 1 game. It's only, but the Browns fan base, their organization, the higher ups, whoever, everybody, I think they are tired of, this could be our year. This could finally be our year. We finally have a quarterback. Deshaun Watson got hurt late last year, and they were able to make it to the playoffs with Joe Flacco, and end up falling short to the Texans. But they are not here to. They paid him $230 million, so they're not here not to contend, right? And before Watson got hurt last year, he wasn't doing very much. He wasn't looking like the Deshaun Watson from the Houston Texans days. So I feel like people are starting to get a bit impatient. I still think week 1 calling for him to be benched is a bit premature. But he definitely has to play better. There's going to be a lot more pressure on him to play better. And if he doesn't, I think they're going to start looking at going in a different direction, potentially starting this season. Like, Jameis Winston is a career backup now, but we saw what they did. They have a good defense, and we saw what they did with Joe Flacco last year. So if you have someone out there who's going to help you more than hurt you, that at least gives them a chance. So, and then of course you have the legal issues still lingering. Another case or another accusation here, a lawsuit against him for the same issues as before. So he's just in a tough spot right now, and he's gonna have to start showing up big time, starting on the field and outside of the field, obviously, too. So that was Deshaun Watson and the Browns. Cowboys look good too, by the way. They look like they're back rolling. Questions usually with them will come in the postseason. We kind of know and expect them to do well in the regular season. So that was that. And then the Aaron Rodgers return, highly anticipated return for him. We were excited to see what he'd look like. And he looked like himself. He looked fine, but the Jets still have some kinks to work out, obviously. They had that good drive, and and then I think he got a touchdown, a nice touchdown pass on a free play later in the game, but not much after that. I mean, the story of the night was Jordan Mason. It was the Jordan Mason show out there. A lot of people expected it to be a bit of a drop off with no Christian McCaffrey, but that wasn't the case at all. He stepped right in and looked fantastic, which I think everybody knows how good Christian McCaffrey is, but I think it will make people now in the back of their mind kind of say like, is it the offensive line or is it just your greatness? The answer is obviously it's his greatness, but the offensive line obviously has a big deal to do with that. You put that offensive line from the Falcons out there from week one, nobody's doing anything. So that was that. Not much from the game. Again, it was pretty much dominated from the 49ers side of things. Jordan Mason showed up, showed out. Debo looked good. Brock Purdy looked good. 49ers looked like another threat again this year. And they'll start their trek again, trying to get over the hump. And not much from Ayuk. A lot of talk from offseason with him trying to get that contract. Ultimately got it, but not a big week one, but not too concerned about that. We'll see. And he had Sauce Gardner on him, so not very much. It's going to be heard by many receivers when that guy's on you. And quick hits from the week one season. The Patriots stunned the Bengals. That was very, very shocking. That stingy defense didn't go anywhere with no Bill Belichick. Shouts out to Gerard Mayo for that big win. And the Texans defeated the Colts in a close one. Joe Mixon had 30 carries for 140 plus yards. So that's a good sign for the Texans. I think they are on my radar. Favorite player in NFL, CJ Stroud right now, man. Love him and his faith. I really resonate with that. So always looking for them to do good, and they look like they're going to be in the thick of things again. Anthony Richardson as well. He's back for the Colts, and I think he makes them even more competitive this year. And again, that was a close game. So we'll look out for both of those teams there. Vikings ended up blowing out the Giants 28-6. I think it is time up for Daniel Jones. They got Malik Neighbors, but I think he's just a pedestrian quarterback, maybe a career backup. They need a quarterback. They're not going to do anything without addressing that position. Kind of like how the Falcons have been the past few years. We think we have one now, but we'll see. Puka got hurt, unfortunately, in that great game with the Rams and the Lions. He will be out for 4 weeks, it looks like. So that was very unfortunate. And last quick hit was Tyreek Hill's arrest. That was very, very shocking. Did just, out of the blue, very similar to the Scotty Scheffler situation, the golfer who was arrested trying to go around the police and kind of a miscommunication thing. Those charges ended up getting dropped, which I suspect will probably happen with Tyreek Hill here. That was crazy, but didn't impact his game at all. And he had one of the most legendary touchdown celebrations you'll ever see when he did score. I predicted that he would do that, just knowing kind of seeing how his character is. Kind of makes lights of it and looks like he's always just having fun out there. I'll try to put that up on the screen. That was pretty awesome to see. And Miami gets the win. We'll see how they do the remainder of the season. And that wraps up Week one of the NFL. A lot of things happening, man. A lot of questions, a lot of surprises, a lot of disappointments. But the beauty of it is it is a long season. It's only week one, and more to come. Hopefully, we see some improvements, specifically from my Falcons. Got a tough road ahead of us, but we'll see. High expectations here. Wrapping things up, we have a big fight. Finally, it's been a bit of a layoff here, but big fight this weekend. Canelo versus Berlanga. And that should be a good show. We got Caleb Plant on that undercard. Another one of my favorite fighters. Can't wait to see Sweet Hands get to work there. Predictions with the Canelo Berlanga fight. I think Canelo wins pretty handedly. And I actually think that Berlanga Munguia is a better fight. And I, to be honest, think Munguia may be the better fighter. I don't know if Berlanga is ready. I don't know if he has that experience and has been tested enough for a Canelo fight. And I think we may see a masterclass and potentially a knockout with Canelo and Berlanga here. Berlanga has power, and one thing after the Haney Garcia fight, one thing I've done is slowed my rush to judgment. Like, I didn't think Garcia had a chance, and I knew about his power and his quickness, but so did Haney. So, and it's, Ryan Garcia is just so straightforward. Like, you know what he's coming out with. You know what to expect. You know what to stay away from. You know his weaknesses, and that's why it was so shocking to, like, you knew exactly what he was going to do, and he still did it. And so we know Berlanga has power, and not just power, knockout power. And he had that 16, not even a 16 streak knockout fight. It was a 16 streak first round knockout run for him. So he has power. But at this point in Canelo's career, I just don't think there's much he hasn't seen. I think he is just on another level. Barring Berlanga getting a lucky shot in there and actually hurting Canelo, which I haven't seen with my own two eyes. I don't think it'll be very close here. And I think 2 seconds after the fight we'll be demanding for Canelo and Benavidez again. So that will be very interesting. Either way, I will be tuned in. Good undercard. And obviously going to be an exciting main event. And we had that lag. I feel like it was a slow start to the beginning of the year. Then the summer, we got all these fights. And then we've been in that dead season with boxing again. Not much going on. But the end of the year is expected to bring some excitement. The one I've had circled since they were supposed to fight back in June, since before they were supposed to fight back in June, Beterbiev and Bivol. I can't wait for that fight. We got Shakur fighting again later this year. We got some big fights coming up. I think this kind of kicks it off here for us. So we shall see. This was very, very fun. A lot of football, and we have so much more left. My Braves, we are fighting for our playoff lives. We are hanging in there. Last I checked, we were beating the Nationals, trying to get that wild card spot. I think the Phillies are long gone. Going to get the division this year. It's about time we gave it to someone else. I mean, we've been dominating that for decades now. um, but thanks for joining. This was another great episode, and we will be back next week.